Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the r/Indieheads podcast. I'm your host, Matty, aka Recon IG. On this week's podcast, we have
Will, user Will for Thrill.
Ollie, or I am Tupac AMA.
Lucas or
Lucas. You're lagging, by the way.
Yeah, I can barely hear you at Spence.
Oh, now we can't hear you. Sorry about that, guys. A quick thing, real quick. We already recorded part of the podcast already, but my computer decided to fuck up, and we lost my part of the stuff, my part of what we listened to this week. So yeah, I'm just gonna go over again very quickly. Travi Scott Radio leaked last night. I like it. Some great tracks. Production's very good throughout. Travis Scott has really surprised me these past few past 2 years. Going from this guy I fucking hated to someone that I can say, oh wow, I actually really dig this guy. So yeah, Rodeo, definitely recommend it. Some great tracks in here. The track with Justin Bieber especially is very good. The Weeknd Be Behind the Madness. Don't have much to say. It's a very insignificant album from The Weeknd. It's a solid pop album, but not much else. Kind of miss The Weeknd from Trilogy, but we're never going to get that ever again. So, it's just better to accept this new Weeknd and try to move on. Okay, Will, what'd you listen to this week?
All right, the first one is one I think we all have something to say about is Rae Jepsen, Emotion.
Yes.
I think one thing we can definitely all agree on is that there's not going to be a better sounding radio pop album this year. There hasn't, or will there be, one that sounds better?
I would agree, probably.
Because she enlists just like a crack team of producers that just hit this out of the park, because they're like following the whole trend of synth pop that's coming back in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas like a lot of the synth pop is just kind of this rehash of the 80s, just being sentimental, and a lot of the others just kind of boring and uninteresting. They like capture the spirit of 80s synth pop that makes people so sentimental for it, but it sounds very modern. It sounds like it has a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely one of the better sounding albums of the year. And obviously, it's a pop album, so these songs are catchy.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, my biggest concern, and still is a little bit, is just how I was really hoping that Carly would just kind of, because I've been hearing for months that this album was actually pretty good. So I was interested in seeing that what she might how she's changed since her last album, what she would bring to the table this time. And she's still just kind of, I know, like her persona is still kind of the Disney character a little bit, and all the songs are kind of cliche explorations of love that have kind of been done to death. Mm-hmm. And definitely at first that kind of like, I'm not even that big of a lyrics person, but still, that just like kind of one of the things that kind of makes me kind of weary of pop music in general. Is just that it just all just kind of been done to death. But then as I've listened to this album a little bit more, I've become a little less bothered by it and realized that even if it is still a little cliche, it's still a minor increment for Carly. Because like on the lead single, I Really Like You, there's a lot of undertones of kind of like sexual tension going on mm-hmm. that you didn't really get from her last other songs, And then others, one song that actually does take a unique stance is LA Hallucinations, when she's talking about the paparazzi.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of that, I thought it was an interesting song, or at least it was an interesting change of pace. And then I think my favorite song on here is Warm Blood, the one that was produced by Rostam Batmanglij of Vampire Weekend. Now I like this song a lot because it incorporates a lot of the things I love so much about Modern Vampires of the City, about the production there. It has that same kind of throbbing sub bass that we heard in Obvious Bicycles, but it's a little bit more prominent here. And then you also we have some of the pitch shifting vocals that was done so well on Modern Vampires of the City, and it's done very well here. And that's just very rare. 9.5 times out of 10, pitch shifting does not work, but Rostam has just nailed it like no other producer I've heard yet. So it's definitely always welcome to hear that. And this definitely, like, most of my complaints about this album is just what it isn't rather than what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely gonna be it's definitely the best radio pop album I've heard in a while, but it's still kind of like if Carly had just come out a little bit more and had a little bit more of a personality and kind of more unique points of view, I think that this could have gone from being a really good pop album to a classic or great, you know? Well, what were your thoughts?
I do somewhat agree with you that yes, I do kind of wish Rae Jepsen had more of a personality, but I think I guess I'm coming in more as a guy who does listen to a decent amount of pop music, and well, I think it's, you know, we can agree that you don't listen to a whole lot of pop music.
No.
So yeah, you probably come in, you know, but I think she comes through, like, she has a very nice voice, first and foremost. Her voice is fucking incredible. Production is great. Personality, she's not boring. I think...
she's definitely more interesting here. Then songs like Emotion and songs like, I think, which one was it? There's one where she's kind of like tantalizing the guy, kind of like, I want you to think about me. Mm-hmm. I think Emotion she was kind of like, almost like teasing him, which is kind of a little bit more sinister than the old Carly Rae Jepsen might have been.
So yeah, I don't know if I say she lacks a personality, because I don't know if I can entirely agree with that. I can definitely say compared to, you know, others you might listen to, she doesn't have enough personality. But for a pop album, you know, definitely has a lot more personality than, you know, a lot of other stuff. If anything, this is pretty much more like a more expansive version of, say, maybe 1989, I guess, from Taylor Swift.
Yeah, definitely. I think this one's because that was also kind of a synth pop revival album, but that one felt very much sentimental towards the year 1989 and pop music then. This one is very forward thinking.
Yeah, it's taking the, you know, classic pop ideals and modernizing them, where 1989 kind of does. I think 1989 is production wise is very simple. It's very good, but like let's look at Bad Blood, the original Bad Blood on 1989. That song is bare bones. It's just, it lacks certain things, but on the remix they do add more to it, and it's a lot better. But this album, it's a bit more expansive in its production, and definitely has a bit more oomph to it than 1989 did.
Definitely, like, especially the choruses, there's a lot of just oomph. Yeah, like you said, oomph, like on "I Really Like You." Like the first time I heard it was like some live TV performance. I thought, I just heard another Carly Rae Jepsen single, kind of twee. But then, yeah, I heard the album version, and yeah, it just has a lot of muscle behind it that kind of elevates this album above its contemporaries.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, what do you guys have anything to say, Lucas and Allie?
I haven't actually listened to the album in full yet.
Oh, Allie, by the way, we can't hear you, buddy.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So I haven't actually listened to the album in full yet. I've listened to like All That, Warm Blood, and I Really, Really Like You. And All That and Warm Blood are really amazing. Kind of lukewarm on the other one, but I need to check out the full album still.
I mean, I really like you. Definitely the core, like that's one of the disappointing parts, is just that, like, how low effort that is. Like the chord, I really, 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 really like you. But like Anthony Fantano in his review, like he did kind of point that does kind of like fit along with her personality and the image she's going for, which is kind of like the Disney personality.
Kind of ditzy.
Kind of. Like I give her some credit. That's why, like, the album's been growing on me. Like, well, I've been giving it more and more credit since I first heard it. But yeah, it's definitely like I'm interested to see if she actually does blow up, like, to the status of like your Taylor Swifts, your Beyoncés, your Rihannas, kind of after this album. Maybe not that high, but still, you know, where she's a big name, and see how she establishes herself with even more and more. Like, not even fame, because she already has a lot of fame. I guess
I feel like she'll be more popular in maybe Europe or even her home state of Canada than like the United States, because there's plenty of pop artists that are very pop. Like, let's see, Robin, who's, you know, she's very popular in the UK, but she's only had like one hit in the US or one big hit.
True.
So I feel like she'll probably do better, you know, not in the US than, you know, right. I don't know, but you know, I like it. I'm so sorry, people. I'm tired. Will, please talk about your other
the other one. I don't have as much to say about it. It's Mutilator Defeated at Last by DOCs. And this album, I mean, like, this is my first album I've ever heard by them, and like, I think most people that know me I'm a sucker for well done, kind of straightforward rock music. And this album, like, it delivers that. It just rocks. Like, that's really all I can say about it. Just one of the most, like, enjoyable albums of 2015 so far. And yeah, I've checked out a few of their other albums, and I like them, but not quite as much as this one. I think they hit their stride here. It's definitely an album I've been listening to a lot. I haven't been listening to it as much this week, but I haven't talked about it on the podcast yet. So I definitely give that recommendation to anyone listening that enjoys rock music.
All right, nice. What did you listen to this week? What did you listen to this week, Allie?
So this week I listened to Reflector by Arcade Fire as one of them. And my opinions haven't changed all that much since the last time. The first half of the album, the first side pretty much, I think is still a mess. Like the only songs I really like on it are Reflector and Here Comes the Nighttime. The rest of it I just
Do you like Normal Person?
I don't actually.
Part
Part of that for me was like I did enjoy it for a while, and then when I saw them live, because I always thought like this would be so killer live, and then when I saw them, like it was completely toothless. The performance, it was
really,
yeah, it was just like it lacked everything that was in the recording. Because I thought that was gonna be like amplified when I saw them, and it wasn't at all. So that really kind of like a lot of disappointment with that. But the second half is really amazing. Actually, with the exception of Awful Sound, though, I think that's aptly titled.
see, I'm kind of the opposite. I mean, like I haven't listened to this album a whole lot, so I need to. But like my impressions of the album is that I really like the first disc a lot more than the second. So
Oh,
that's
really?
interesting.
Yeah, but then like the stretch from like It's Never Over, and then Porno, and then Afterlife and Supersymmetry. Oh my god, that is some of Arcade Fire's best work, in my opinion.
I like after. The thing about Arcade Fire is that in every album, the penultimate, the next to last track is always the best track. Like it's this every time. It's always the most ridiculous song on the album.
Yeah,
I'm always blown away.
and then Porno is like really incredible. I think that's probably one of my favorite songs by them. It's like, well, there's every song on Funeral, and then there's that song because like, Funeral as a whole is a masterpiece.
Right.
But like, I just love the little part where he's like saying before the line is lost, and then like the audio like just deteriorates right there. It's little things like that that are so cool in the production, and that's on that song and a lot of other songs on the second half.
Yeah, I think. I mean, like I said, I haven't listened to this one as much as their other albums, so I can't give as good of opinion and thoughts on this one. But even if it's not, the thing is, like, it's not perfectly done. They're transitioned to more towards dance pop, but I think that it was a necessary change.
Yeah,
Because while Suburbs is my next favorite after Funeral, still I feel like it. Those first three albums are stylistically very similar, and if they'd kept on doing that, I think that over time people would have started falling out of favor with Arcade Fire and kind of criticizing them. So
that's
I
true.
definitely, even if it's not perfectly executed, I think that this album is more interesting than if they'd just made another album like their first three.
No, but my issue isn't with the stylistic change; it's with the execution of that change.
Right, and like I said,
'Cause
it's not perfect.
there's a lot of mediocre songs, in my opinion. Whereas their other albums like were just all like throughout stellar. This one actually had like some straight up mediocre songs on it. But when they
Yeah,
did execute it properly, it was amazing. It worked really well. So
I think also that they just like mastered that like right out the gates with Funeral and over the next two albums. Like they had a very distinct sound that like as soon as you hear it, you know it's Arcade Fire, and they just mastered it so perfectly. So for them to
yeah,
change just their that means they're to change everything, like kind in a way at least, like their songwriting style, the way they work together, and it might be some growing pains,
that's
but I
true.
think that the next album will be up to par. I just don't see them releasing a bad album anytime soon.
That's true. And then my next album I listened to was "It's Never Been Like That" by Phoenix, and it's a really solid indie pop album. I actually hadn't listened to any pre Wolfgang Amadeus Phoenix before this. Well, aside from "If I Ever Feel Better," and this is like it's at its best, it has like some of the best indie pop songs I've heard, and then it's at least like pretty solid throughout. I've only listened to it a couple times, so I don't really have much to say on it. But probably my favorite tracks are like "Consolation Prize," "North," and "Sometimes in the Fall."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I have for that. Sorry. Yeah, I've only listened to it like twice so far.
Yeah. Let's see. What did you listen to this week?
All right, so this week I listened to the first one is Destroyer Poison Season, um, which has gotten a lot of acclaim on the sub, and I think semi-critically so far. I know at least Fantano really liked it.
It's weird because
Um,
critics are giving it good ratings, but RY Rate Your Music hasn't really liked it that much, which is kind of weird.
huh, that is weird. Anyways, but even in the podcast chat, it seems like most people like it. Um, but yeah, I really dig it. It might be in my top 10 of the year, definitely top 20 at least. Um, and yeah, it's just really good. It's also an album that's hard to, pick like favorite songs, because there's just so many different ones. Like there's the really soft ones, and then the ones like, can't remember the song right now, but the second song, um, but it's just all out like this Springsteen like tribute jam, that's just so rad. Really, just the whole album. He continues that theme with Times Square throughout the album, which I think works pretty well. And Dan Behar, as always, is just a like fantastic but really obscure lyricist. Where you're just like, I really don't know what you mean half the time, but I like it. Um, but yeah, I really like that. That he's continued to change, like because with Kaput, it came out with that really like 80s kind of smooth jazz sound, which is always funny because when I explain that to somebody, they just give me this like grimace because that sounds awful. Like when you're just like, yeah, an 80s smooth jazz album. But Kaput worked really well. He just managed to make everything fit. And then with this one, he's still changing, which is cool because, he's been in the game since the 90s. And he's still changing, still working on himself as an artist, which is really rad. Um, but yeah, I didn't listen to the leak, so I just heard it for the first time when it came out. Um, so I've only listened to it 2 times, I think, but I can see myself just replaying this a lot in the upcoming months. Does anybody else want to talk about Poison Season?
This was my first Destroyer album, and I kind of agree with all the things you said. Like I enjoy his lyricism. I kind of enjoy that it has varied instrumentation. It's very kind of lush at sometimes, very sparse at sometimes, and I think it's like I enjoy all of it, but I can't get past his vocals styling yet.
I'm gonna somewhat agree with Will on that one. Where I think I need to give this more listens because I do need to get used to his vocals because they are kind of
They're very theatrical and very
yes.
dramatic, kind of. And like I said, that's not something I typically enjoy, but I enjoy almost everything else about this album. So if I can get past his, or if they grow on me, this is definitely going to be one of my favorites of the year.
Yeah,
So
it was even the same with me. Like the first time I heard Kaput, I was just like, "Whoa, this guy has such an interesting voice." Um, but yeah, definitely, I definitely encourage both of you guys to just keep listening because there's just something about him, like that kept me coming back to Kaput and eventually loving it. And then once I got past that, I love Poison Season. I also love Destroyer's Rubies. I have to go deeper into his discography now, um, but yeah, definitely his voice. I can always understand that when people say it. But yeah, then I guess I'll just talk about my next one, which is a Minutemen, Double Nickels on the Dime. So Minutemen, as probably most people know, very landmark punk band, very landmark independent band and everything. Really important to indie music as a whole. But this album, I just listened to it after Arthi, or Clockwork Watermelon for people who don't know her. Um, Recommended it to me one day, just kind of on a whim. We were talking about punk, I think, and she's like, "Oh, that's my favorite punk album." And I was like, "Okay, I'll check it out." And it's like 43 tracks long, but they're like all less than 2 minutes, so it still only ends up about over an hour. That said, I would still recommend, trying to break this album up maybe into 4 listens in the 4 parts it's in, because the Minutemen had 3 members, and if I remember correctly, each member chose the songs they wanted on one side, and then they collectively chose the last side or something. Um, but it's just, oh man, it's so fantastic. It has some of the best bass lines like I've ever heard, and it's on a punk album, which I never expected to happen. And it's so incredibly funky, like, which I also never expected to say about a punk album. But then it also has all the social awareness and all the political commentary that a punk album tends to have. And so it combines all these elements just so incredibly well. And now I just need to dig in the rest of their discography, even though they were fairly short-lived. But I highly, highly recommend Double Nickels on the Dime, just to music listeners in general, since it's definitely like one of the less punk albums that are punk albums that you'll hear, just because of all the other influences. But I think it's something that anybody can like. And since the songs are so short, you could really marathon the album. I wouldn't recommend it because I tried it and I got exhausted after half of it because it's still all the same amount of ideas that you expect a 43-track album to have. So, yeah, definitely recommend everyone check it out. It's really, really good listen.
Yeah. So, I think that's all what we listened to this week. And we're just going to transition right now into our album discussion of Beach House's Depression Cherry with John from Album Review TV. So we're going to be transitioning right now. Welcome back, everyone. Let's see. We are going to be talking Depression Cherry with our special guest, John from ARTV. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. I'm excited to talk about Depression Cherry with you guys.
So, yeah, let's see. So I think the person here who's probably the most positive on the album is probably Ali. So do you want to start, Ali? So
Sure.
we can tear your opinion to shreds and tell you why you're wrong.
All right. So I absolutely love this album. It's amazing. From that first, that drone on Levitation, which, it's a continuation of Irene for me. Like, it sounds like that. And that was, the first thing I noticed when I listened to it. And that was just that I immediately knew it was going to be great. And then also just that, sorry. Yeah, so just, okay, can someone else go, dude? I'm having a total space out right now, man. Sorry.
I guess I'll go. So coming into this album, I hadn't really gotten to Beach House yet. I feel like it was one of those things that I was kind of getting around to, but never really. I just didn't want to yet because I think I was just trying to listen to other artists and just other things were going on. So kind of maybe a week or two before this album came out, I was just like, okay, let's get in the fucking Beach House, let's get in the mode, gotta fucking do this. And so to give some thoughts on their previous albums, their debut is better. It is actually pretty good and better than I expected. Devotion, it's good, but not as good as the debut. Teen Dream is probably their best album, and Bloom is probably second place. Where Teen Dream and Bloom, they have this sort of they have more of an expansive sound than the sound they had on their first two albums, or taking the sound of the first two albums, adding a bit more expansiveness to them. And yeah, in this new album, Depression Cherry, it kind of takes a step back and goes more into more minimalistic production on those first two records. But it also creates some problems where I think the biggest complaint that I've seen for this album is that it just Beach House are just showing no real progression in their music. If anything, they've been regressing in their music with this new album, and I kind of agree with that because we get little hints of them doing new stuff on Sparks where it's like, holy shit, this sounds really different from other Beach House stuff, but that's the only song on the album that really does sound like that, and then everything else just sort of sounds like pretty typical Beach House, but more their first two albums. So and there's just so many things that overall this album is very pleasant and I enjoy listening to it, but after we get done doing this podcast, I probably won't listen to it ever again, maybe years down the line, but I really have just no interest in listening to this album again, even though I did like it, but it's nothing particularly interesting, which is the problem, where compared to other albums, I don't like Victoria's vocals as much which I think it's sort of a thing with the album, I guess, where it's called Depression Cherry, and it's kind of a throwback to their first, two albums, where Victoria, she just does not sound very confident on these songs. She kind of has her voice instead of more the kind of androgynous tone in her voice on the last two albums, she has more of a, more feminine, more, kind of, I guess, higher pitched voice, I guess. And that kind of leads to this thing where it's kind of weird. And also, her vocals sound very distant, where at least on Teen Dream and Bloom, I could connect with those albums a lot more, and I can get more emotional with those albums. But this album, I just didn't get that many feelings. Nothing really hit me maybe Teen Dream or Bloom did. And it's just sort of I think Spectrum Pulse said that this album was very distant. I think he said something along the lines of this is their most intimate album, but at the same time it's very distant, and I would agree with that because I feel like it's it's very personal, but at the same time it's not letting us completely in on what's going on, in Victoria's life or whatever, just some of her personal problems. So it's just there's a weird disconnect, And overall, I just kind of like, it's I guess.
Yeah,
It's
I
good
guess.
enough. It's good enough on the ears. I mean, going in, I mean, like listening through this thing. I mean, I definitely had a good time. But kind of like what you were saying there, there's some songs that will really grab your attention, and you see that they're actually exploring some new territory. That's why I got so, I think, excited for this after hearing the track Sparks. But there weren't really many moments beyond that. I mean, I like the idea behind some of this. I like the fact that they were exploring, kind of seeing, I feel like, the good in life in certain situations. Some of these tracks I feel like explored that, but they didn't exactly have the interesting vocals from Victoria, or else even really interesting instrumentals to match up with what they had done on their past two records. And I understand them kind of wanting to step back to simpler times because they were kind of feeling, I guess, pressured or else forced to go for like a bigger arena type sound since they were growing like in their fan base and that sort of thing, more and more people listening to them. But I would have liked to see them, instead of stepping back towards some of their earlier material that I wasn't as into as I was stuff like Teen Dream and especially Bloom, which is my favorite from them. I don't know, I am kind of disappointed with this record overall, but I'm not going to call it a bad record by any means.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't call it bad either. It's just like, it's okay, but like it's very, I guess, very kind of insignificant to
Right.
this year or just Beach House in general. Which, you know, I just hope that their next album they do kind of evolve their sound a little bit, because I think that some people are gonna say like, well, their sound's already pretty original. It's like, I mean, yeah, I mean in general, you know, they did come in with a very, you know, their sound is very unique, and not many others can replicate that sound. But they've been doing this sound since 2007 pretty much, and it's
How
just sort
long
of
can
like,
it go on
okay,
for?
it's like, you know, how long could, yeah, exactly, how long could this go on for? You guys gotta, you know, do something a little different. It's like you get little hints of that on this album, but they don't want to quite go in that territory, and it's just sort of like, this is a very safe album, and it's a very safe album when they really should not be playing it safe anymore. It's like, you guys gotta fucking step up. It's, you know, it's like, this is the time where it's like, okay, you guys gotta really prove yourselves that, you know, you aren't just gonna be making the same album over and over again, because with this new album, it's just like, you guys are just kind of proving some of your haters correct.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to peak at either Teen Dream or else Bloom. I don't want that to be where I stop, you know, having an extreme either interest or else even a love or a passion for their records. I don't want, well, this is another Beach House record, and I'm not going to revisit it until the next time they put out an album, and I'm back here revisiting just to get familiar with their discography again. So I'm hoping that that's not the case in the future.
Yeah,
I kind of agree with. I'm kind of agree with both of you that this is definitely a step back after, like, in terms of quality and sound, the type of sound they're using after Teen Dream and Bloom, with Bloom also being my favorite. But there's some things that I'm not going to come back to the entire album. There's still some highlights on here for me, like Levitation. That was kind of a slow burn for me. Like, it took me a while for me to really get into that track, but I have grown fond of that one. I like the build it has over the course. It kind of builds tension towards the end. And then Sparks, people have already talked about how it's a misleading single, how we thought Beach House was going shoegaze. But it's still a good track. One thing that kind of disappointed me about it, though, is that, like, it has that intro, you know, kind of like that chanting kind of, it's kind of random sounding, like, it's kind of like abrupt to at the beginning, so I thought that there would be some kind of, when I first heard it as a single, I thought there'd be a transition from the Levitation into Sparks.
Oh yeah, there's like no transition at all.
Oh yeah, I was gonna agree with that, because they just fade out and then go to the next track. There's no real cohesiveness.
Cool transition. I was really excited for that, hearing that track. Like, ooh, how is this going to go together? But the track is still really, it sounds a little bit more like you're reaching for a radio hit to me, almost, but it's still not bad.
It sounds like something that you're going to hear on like Sirius XMU or something like that. For something.
That's actually where the career starts in the first place.
I was riding with my brother in his car a few weeks ago when he has Sirius XM, and I heard it like twice in like the course of like 1 week, maybe 3 times. It kind of reminds me of that song, Naked and Famous, the Young Blood by the Naked and Famous. I don't know why it reminds me of that song. But it reminds me of that song for some reason. Just like, I don't know why, the vocals, which actually, like, I like that song all right, so it's not a bad thing, but first time I heard it, like, it kind of channeled that song for me. And then also a Space Song is a good one. It kind of reminds me of Teen Dream, kind of the vibe of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wonderful track.
then PPP, I think is absolutely fantastic. It's one of Beach House. I think that's one of Beach House's best songs they've ever made. Like, she does that spoken word that kind of reminds me of Kim Gordon a little bit. And then, like, especially when they get to the chorus, or what I guess what you would technically call a chorus when Chuck's about skating on ice or whatever, they bring in all these vocal harmonies that are just gorgeous. And this song also, like, the instrumentation with the synths and the guitars is a lot more active, and there's kind of the interplay between them where they kind of trade the melody off again, on and off. Then at the end, it kind of, the sound gets bigger and bigger. Yeah, it's definitely the most well-done track on the album, I think, and definitely one that I'll keep coming back to time and time again when I want Beach House in my life. But for me, the thing is, like, it starts off, those first 6 tracks, while some of them are less good than others, it's still pretty solid. But then after that, when he goes to Wildflower and Bluebird and Days of Candy especially, it just gets kind of really forgettable for me. Like, Wildflower and Bluebird, like, I've heard this album at least like 7 or 8 times, and I still cannot hum those tunes to you.
Oh yeah.
And then Days of Candy is just it drags. I mean, that's definitely one of the most. It's the longest track on the album, and it's one of the most sparse. And just the melody doesn't really warrant as much time as they spend on it, and just kind of drags its feet. It's kind of a lackluster ending. If they could have put together good, for me at least, if they'd maybe chosen a better closer, my thoughts might be more positive. But since it does end kind of a way I don't like, it definitely kind of sours my opinion of the rest of the album. So overall, I think they did. I mean, yes and no. Like, I definitely, because this album still kind of has the high production value of Teen Dream and Bloom, but with the more stripped back sound. So I guess it does have a unique place in their discography. It's still definitely, I do think that it's kind of compared to their past 2 albums, it is a little bit underwhelming and less memorable for sure at parts.
So I'm going to go off of what Will said and talk about how he said it has like the same production value, but it's like more low-key and stuff. And that's actually what I like about this album. Because Devotion's my second favorite Beach House album, and Teen Dream is my favorite. So it brings those kind of things together, and I really love that about it. Most of it for me is just I really like it, and I guess your criticisms are mostly valid. So
right, I mean that's ultimately it's art. It's subjective. Yeah, no, like I said, this album definitely has a lot of likable qualities to it, but they're just kind of spread out, and they don't really come together to make a product like Teen Dream where it's very satisfying listen. This one doesn't feel quite as much so.
I feel like the connectivity between tracks could have been helped out a little bit, at least, if some of the track listing, I know it's kind of a weird complaint, but if I could switch around a few tracks, like if it had closed out on Triple P, like, I don't know, that just feels like an epic kind of
or at least
closer.
I think that feels like the next to last track to me, like the penultimate track of the album.
Yeah,
so
I could see that. Yeah.
Then maybe, I don't know, maybe something like, I don't know. See, I don't even know what would be the other tracks, like the melodies are good, but just that the lack of instrumentation kind of makes it kind of drag on, like 1037. I think it's a nice, cute melody. It's enjoyable, but just like it's just so sparse. It's just kind of the drums, Victoria, and then just kind of a really kind of like a synth drone for most of it, and it just kind of it could have made the song a little bit more lively and move along a little bit more. But with the way they did it, I just think that. Because I was left wanting.
Yeah, for me, as somebody who's like sort of in the middle, but I'm leaning more towards a positive feeling about this. I especially want to talk about that synth drone type thing. At first, I really love it. Like, I love what it does in Levitation, and how at first it's not much of a presence, and it's more of just kind of like the skeletal frame for the band to work on, and then near the end of the song, it just feels really big, and it's really cool. But definitely, yeah. And then definitely for me, my first few listens to this album were just kind of in the background. I was just listening to it, and so at first I was like, yeah, this album is great. Today I was listening to it more, with more scrutiny, and I still like it. Still think it's good, but definitely, like I said, I'm more center positive on it. And one of the things that I realized is that synth drone by Wildflower, does feel, because it kind of like repeats, throughout the album. You can kind of hear a little bit of that synth organ type feel. And by the time you're late into the album, if you think about it a little too much, it's kind of like, man, I get it, but it's like almost a little much. And I almost feel like, because I still like Wildflower and Bluebird as tracks on their own a little bit, for me at least. But when I listen to it within the context of the album, I can really see how they're not as standout, because by the time you get to those tracks, they might not feel as like present or doing as much. And then also on Days of Candy, what I kind of wish would have happened, because I like how it opens. I like that choral arrangement. I like that. I kind of wish it was just that, really short outro. I would have been fine with that. I definitely agree, though, that it does feel like it goes a little too long. So I agree with you on that. But if almost it was just that choral arrangement, I would have just been fine with that.
That could have been cool outro, maybe, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
The thing is that also, like, the only album of Beach Houses that really, like, grabbed me from immediately was Bloom. Like, Teen Dream, I like it a lot now, but it took just months of just coming back to it every once in a while and for it to just grow on me. And I've been listening to this one. I was a bad boy. I got the leak.
Ooh.
And bad boy alert.
I would never
Anyways,
do anything like that.
yeah. But yeah, so I kept on coming back to it. Like, I wasn't really feeling it at first, but like I just assumed that I didn't judge it really immediately, just because like I said in the past, Beach House has been a band that was a slow burn for me. But like, so I finally come to the decision that it has a lot of good qualities, just not enough to make it a cohesive standout.
Not enough to make it like an amazing record. And I was like you. I listened to it in advance for a little bit, and it took a while for it to grow on me. I'm going to say that because, I felt terrible for Beach House, because having a record leak so far in advance can be devastating, even though, album sales obviously aren't as important as they used to be. But what I found really interesting is that each time I would like give myself like a week in between listens, whenever I'd come back to it, I'd be finding myself like intrigued by something else. Like the track Beyond Love turned into one of my favorites on this record. At first, thought it was boring as hell. I would sit there, I was completely unentertained by it, but the more I listened to it, I was like, I'm really loving Victoria's vocals on this thing. Everything about this track is like, there's like something like the guitar will kick in at a certain point, and the melody there's a groove that I just kind of find myself falling into. Not just that track, but there's several others that happened for. I would sit through them the first couple of listens and not really doing anything for me. But it changed, I guess, the amount of time that I gave this record, and the fact that I was willing to give it a couple of more extra listens. And at this point, I've probably heard the record maybe between 10 and 13 times, I'd say, all the way through. I'd say it went from being an okay album in my book to something that I find good, maybe come back to from time to time, but it's just weird how things will kind of reveal themselves to you. Like it's like they were there the whole time, but it's like something you didn't even pick up, like the first 5 listens even. It's one of those type of records for me.
Yeah, even on my... Go ahead, Matty.
I feel like, yeah, maybe if I get some more listens, I'll understand more things. But for now, my opinion is that this album, it should be. I wish it was more interesting, because there are interesting songs where they do new things, and there's little tiny bits of that. But overall, it's just sort of like they had a lot more interesting ideas on their previous albums. Like even from their first album, like I would probably say that there's more interesting musical ideas on their first album than maybe, excluding Sparks, of course. There's more interesting stuff on their debut album than maybe this album. Like, Master None, which is, become a big, one of their most known tracks, because it was sampled by The Weeknd, is really interesting. I love the little synth intro in it, and like I love, just how that track works at all. But like in this album, just again, it's forgettable to me. As in, like, I think Bill was mentioning, like there are songs that, like, you could say their name and I have no idea how they go. Because, and you were also mentioning that the track listing is not very good, where it just feels like songs were kind of randomly put together, and it's like it lacks cohesion. It's like it just feels like this is just like a collection of tracks that kind of tie Beach House fans over, or more touring material. And it's just, I feel like maybe I don't understand this album as much as I should. And I'll maybe give it more listens to kind of get a full idea.
Well, I
whole
kind of feel
idea
like
of it
this.
taking over.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this record is just like you said. Obviously, I think we all agree that Sparks is pretty, I guess, inventive in and of itself. It's got a creative ingenuity to it. But some of these tracks, like Space Song, reminds me a lot of Bloom, and like kind of what was going on with like the synths and stuff on that track. And I could say the same for maybe even Levitation for something kind of like a cross between Teen Dream and Bloom. And it feels like more on this album, instead of like coming up with new and fresh ideas and moving forward, it's just kind of like borrowing maybe for a little bit from each album that they've had up until this point, which kind of gets a little bit frustrating.
It's kind of like the equivalent of like those, you know how in TV shows they occasionally do like the clip show episodes because they have to fill in a certain episode order.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes they can't put together an episode, so they just pull clips from like another episode, maybe some newer stuff here and there. This kind of feels like the album equivalent of a clip show of a TV episode.
What's your response to that, Ollie?
Honestly, I do agree that it lacks cohesion. I think it's a really great collection of songs, but overall, in terms of like an album, it's not that great of like in terms of like cohesion. It's not the best.
Like I think Teen Dream especially is probably the most cohesive in terms of like every track kind of just leads into each other. Like one of the good ones is like Silver Soul into Norway. Like it doesn't have any moments like that on this record where it just feels like they're meant to go together.
Yeah, I think that's what was the most frustrating thing about Sparks was that yeah, like we all said, we all loved it, but that was like the biggest offense of like just being plopped into the album.
Right.
Like, it doesn't fit there.
Yeah.
I'm not always someone who cares about that as much though, so for this it's fine. When it's done well, I love it, but overall it's not something I always look for in a great album. So.
And I think another thing about it is like I don't always like pay that much attention to cohesion, but I think that this album shows a lot of like chinks in the armor kind of like, well, maybe the songs weren't interesting at all ever. Maybe it was just their like instrumentation, or maybe it was just because they went together so well. I mean, I'm not saying that Beach House is bad per se, but because I don't think they are. I like them. I'm just saying that this could have showed some weaknesses in their songwriting. Yeah, like maybe because they did some things on their other albums that they didn't do here, it made them like better, like not from a songwriting perspective. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
If I think I get what you're saying, then I disagree. Because like, fuck, I forgot my point. Sorry, guys.
Well, I think it's like kind of what you're saying. I feel like I can listen to this out. I don't have a problem with it feeling more like a collection of tracks because it's like if you're listening through a greatest hits album for Journey or something. I don't know. A greatest hits album. I can enjoy it, and it's not like I'm gonna be like, wow, this track didn't fade into this track, so it's completely off-putting. In fact, some of my favorite records, while a lot of them do flow into each other, some of them don't have that much connectivity to them, and I feel like that isn't something that puts a nail in a coffin for this album for me in terms of enjoying it.
Yeah, because like one of my favorite albums of all time is the Velvet Underground and Nico. And that one is famous for being incohesive, how like every song sounds completely different from the next. So I guess the cohesion isn't the problem. It's just that it might have shown that the cohesion of the other albums were what made them like one of their strengths.
I would have been more okay with it if there was more fresh ideas. Is what I think is what I'm driving at.
Right.
So yeah, I guess we get some closing thoughts on the album. I guess we'll go through one. I guess I'll go first. Let's see. I guess I should admit that I'm not a big Beach House guy. I do enjoy the material, but I'm not in love with it. It doesn't hold like. There's some people who are very emotionally affected by Beach House music, and it doesn't really have that with me. But it's still very good music. And this album, I can't say that it's a disappointment because I wasn't very hyped for it in the first place. But it was just sort of like there's little tiny things in there that did give me hope for Beach House, and like, okay, they really can evolve their sound. Okay, hold on, before I keep going, someone's echoing. I'm trying to figure out who that is.
Hopefully not me.
I think it might be you.
Is it?
I'm not sure. Okay, anyways, I'll keep going. Sorry for people listening to the audio version. But yeah, I feel like the sound it lacks. It's not super interesting, which is not good because I feel like Beach House was their sort of like this was their moment to really prove to everyone that like, hey, they are the big. I mean, they are the real deal, and they've already kind of proven that with Teen Dream and Bloom. But this was like the real big deal of like, okay, you gotta show everyone like that we're here to stay and we're able to evolve our sound. And they only did that for one track, which is not good. And the song is just not. It's not structured well. It's a bunch of pleasant tunes, but it doesn't hold much interest for me, and I probably won't be going back to this that much.
I agree. There's a lot of in one ear, out the other type of stuff, but I think I'm a little bit more feeling a little more positive than you were, just because I do see myself. I fell asleep to Bloom like every night for like a year straight. Like that was just like my comfort zone type album. It was maybe not every night, but at least like maybe like once or twice a week for like a year. And Teen Dream worked its way in there a few times too. So I'm not going to say it's an emotional connection that I have to them, but it's just kind of like something that I was looking forward to in terms of Depression Cherry because, I got into them with the release of Bloom, went back and checked out their old records, and this time around I was pretty excited for it. And the fact is, there's still, I think someone said the first 5 or 6 tracks were like the best part of it for them, and I think that's kind of where I'm at too, minus 1037 for me. But those first 4 tracks really, I don't really have any complaints there. Yes, it would have been nice to see some transitions in between, just because I know that they've got the creative minds to do that and work it in and make a great cohesive album. So it's a little frustrating, especially when those 4 tracks fit together as well as they do. It's just that they're missing something. There's like a gap there. There's an obvious pause. And then there's a pair of tracks at the end of this thing that I'm really enjoying. PPP I'm a little bit mixed on, but Wildflower and Bluebird, especially some of the guitar parts on Bluebird, I just thought were like phenomenal. It was just a subtle thing that I really picked up on and really enjoyed, but it's just kind of hit and miss from like track like 5 on for me. There's aspects that I like. I think they're pleasant enough, but is it really going to be something that I call ear candy, or else I'm going to see myself continuously revisiting and recommending the hell out of and like annoying people like I did with Bloom? No, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I said most of what I have to say about it so far, but like I still want to emphasize that there's still a few great songs on here. See, Space Song I enjoy a lot. Sparks is great, and I think that like PPP is definitely like easily top 5 Beach House song. So there's stuff here that I enjoy, just not consistently enough for for this to be one of my favorites from Beach House or of the year.
Mm-hmm. Ali?
So I love it. The cohesion thing is a valid complaint, I gotta say. I actually do really like Days of Candy, though. I think it works really well as a closer. Yeah.
Let's see, Lucas?
Yeah, for me, yeah, it's a good album. I really enjoy it. Probably, won't end up in any like top list for me at the end of the year, but yeah, I enjoy it. Particularly the first 3 tracks. Those are, I think that's a really strong opening. Like out of albums I can think of this year, this is a really good one. From Levitation to Sparks to Space Song, it's really effective. But yeah, so really good. Not my favorite album this year, but I still really enjoyed it and will listen to it more as the year goes on, I think.
And so, yeah, that is our discussion of Beach House's Depression
John's
Cherry.
talking to you. You muted John. He's talking right now. Or was talking.
Oh, by the way, John, yeah, we had to mute you because you were echoing. One second. Does he realize that John? Yeah, you have to unmute yourself. Oh, John, you have to. Okay, hold on, we're waiting for him to put earphones in. Okay. Oh, God. John, you have to unmute
We're
yourself.
good. We're good,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
That's my bad. That is my bad. I'm over here like sleep deprived, and I was like, why am I? I'm clicking one thing, and it's like, I think I was hitting the completely wrong thing. Anyways, I don't even remember what my point was with that, so I'm just gonna shut my mouth.
Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed the podcast this week. Thank you, John, for coming on talking Depression Cherry with us. And yeah, bye guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.